I propose to mate with Queen Gaia, Ambassador Roy Freeman declares, his bold words echoing through the cavernous chamber of the Xindi mothership. The assembled alien diplomats freeze, their compound eyes widening in shock. Queen Gaia herself, resplendent in her iridescent robes, leans forward on her crystalline throne, all six of her eyes fixed intently on the human before her. The Xindi mothership hovers in Earth's orbit, a constant reminder of the alien ultimatum delivered 6 months ago. Humanity must prove its worth or face annihilation. The stakes couldn't be higher as Roy, a 35-year-old decorated military veteran, stands before the most powerful being in the known galaxy. Roy's muscular frame remains rigid, his jaw set with determination. He knows his words could either doom humanity or save it. The classified Genesis Gambit operation hinges on this moment, a desperate ploy to infiltrate Xindi society and gain leverage against their superior forces. Queen Gaia's advisors erupt in outrage, their multi-limbed forms gesticulating wildly. "Execution!" they demand, mandibles clicking furiously. But the queen raises a slender, six-fingered hand, silencing them instantly. Her gaze never leaves Roy, studying him with an intensity that seems to pierce his very soul. The human delegation holds its collective breath. They know Roy's unconventional approach is their last hope. Earth's cities lie in the shadow of Xindi warships, their weapons primed and ready. The fate of billions hangs on Queen Gaia's response. Roy stands his ground, acutely aware of the cultural taboo he's just shattered. The Xindi, despite valuing genetic diversity, consider interspecies breeding strictly forbidden. His proposal is both an affront and a curiosity to their alien sensibilities. Queen Gaia rises from her throne, her movements fluid and graceful. She descends the crystalline steps, each footfall echoing in the now silent chamber. The Xindi's otherworldly beauty is on full display as she approaches Roy, her skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns. "You dare propose such a thing, human?" Queen Gaia's voice is melodic, yet tinged with an edge of steel. She circles Roy, her six eyes taking in every detail of his form. "Do you not fear the consequences of your audacity?" Roy meets her gaze unflinchingly. "Your Majesty, I fear the annihilation of my species far more than any personal consequence." A ripple of murmurs passes through the Xindi delegation. Queen Gaia halts her circling, standing face to face with Roy. The tension in the room is palpable, the air thick with the potential for either a groundbreaking alliance or the spark that ignites an interstellar war. As Queen Gaia contemplates her response, the future of humanity hangs in the balance. Roy's bold gambit has set in motion events that will reshape the galaxy, for better or worse. The next words uttered in this chamber will determine the fate of two species and potentially change the course of galactic history forever. Queen Gaia's eyes narrowed, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with an intensity that matched the tension in the room. The fate of humanity hung on her next words. "Your proposal is intriguing, Ambassador Freeman," she said, her melodic voice carrying a hint of curiosity. "I accept." A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. Roy's heart pounded in his chest, a mix of relief and apprehension washing over him. He had not expected such a swift acceptance. "However," Queen Gaia continued, silencing the growing murmurs with a raised hand, "you must prove your worth. You will undergo a series of trials, which I shall oversee personally." The Xindi Council erupted in protest. "Your Majesty, this violates our most sacred traditions," one advisor bellowed, his mandibles clicking furiously. Queen Gaia's gaze snapped to the dissenting voices, her eyes flashing with an otherworldly authority. "I am your queen," she declared, her voice resonating through the chamber. "My word is final." The council fell silent, cowed by her display of power. Roy stood motionless, acutely aware that he had just become the center of a political maelstrom that could reshape galactic relations. Without warning, two Xindi guards flanked Roy, their exoskeletons gleaming under the chamber's crystalline lights. "Come, human," one of them commanded, his voice a guttural click. "You will be prepared for examination." Roy was escorted through a labyrinth of iridescent corridors, each turn revealing new marvels of Xindi architecture and technology. They arrived at a sterile white room that hummed with energy. A female Zindi with shimmering, bioluminescent skin approached him. "I am Dr. Zara," she introduced herself, her voice softer than the guards but no less authoritative. "I will be overseeing your physical assessment." The examination that followed was unlike anything Roy had experienced. Zindi devices scanned every cell in his body, projecting holographic representations of his internal systems. Roy watched in fascination as Dr. Zara and her team pored over the data, their compound eyes darting from one readout to another. "Fascinating," Dr. Zara murmured, her fingers dancing over a holographic interface. "Your physiology is primitive compared to ours, yet there are unexpected compatibilities." As the examination progressed, Roy became increasingly aware of the vast differences between human and Zindi biology. The aliens' multi-jointed limbs moved with fluid grace, their exoskeletons shimmering with colors that seemed to shift with their moods. "The genetic variances are significant," one of Dr. Zara's assistants noted, his mandibles twitching with excitement, "but not insurmountable." Roy's mind raced. The implications of their findings could be groundbreaking for both species. But he reminded himself of his true mission, Operation Genesis Gambit. Every piece of information he gleaned could be crucial for Earth's survival. As the examination concluded, a tall, imposing Zindi entered the room. His exoskeleton bore the marks of countless battles, and his eyes fixed on Roy with undisguised hostility. "I am Crix," he announced, his voice a low rumble. "I have been tasked with preparing you for the trials ahead, human." Roy straightened, meeting Crix's gaze. "I'm ready to begin," he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty churning in his gut. Crix led Roy to a vast training arena, its walls lined with weapons and obstacles, unlike anything on Earth. "Your first lesson begins now," Crix growled, dropping into a combat stance. What followed was a brutal sparring session that pushed Roy to his limits. His military training served him well, allowing him to adapt quickly to Crix's alien fighting style. As they fought, Roy noticed Crix's initial hostility giving way to a grudging respect. "You fight well for a human," Crix admitted as they paused to catch their breath. "Perhaps you are not entirely without merit." As days passed, Roy's training intensified. He learned Zindi combat techniques, studied their customs, and pushed his body to new limits. All the while, he kept his senses alert for any information that could aid Earth. During a rare moment of respite, Roy caught sight of Queen Gaia observing his training from a secluded balcony. Her eyes met his, and for a moment he sensed a flicker of something beyond mere scientific curiosity in her gaze. As Roy prepared for his first major trial, he overheard hushed conversations between Zindi council members. Mentions of a growing opposition to Queen Gaia's rule, whispers of discontent with her decision to entertain a human's proposal. He filed away this information, knowing it could be crucial to understanding the complex political landscape he now found himself in. The day of the trial arrived. Roy stood at the entrance to a massive arena, his heart pounding with anticipation. The crowd of Zindi spectators buzzed with excitement and skepticism. In the royal box, Queen Gaia sat regally, her 6 eyes fixed on Roy. A loud klaxon sounded, and the gates opposite Roy creaked open. From the darkness emerged a monstrous creature, clearly bioengineered for combat. Its multiple limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural hunger. As Roy stepped into the arena to face this formidable opponent, he knew that the outcome of this trial would have far-reaching consequences, not just for him, but for the future of human-Zindi relations and the delicate balance of power within the alien society. The beast charged, and Roy's world narrowed to the immediate threat before him. All his training, all his hopes for Earth's survival, all hinged on his performance in this moment. With a deep breath, he readied himself for the fight of his life. The beast lunged at Roy, its razor-sharp claws slicing through the air. Roy ducked, rolling to the side as the creature's massive form sailed over him. The arena erupted in a cacophony of alien cheers and hisses. Roy's muscles burned from the exertion, but his mind remained razor-sharp. He analyzed the beast's movements, noting the slight hesitation before each attack. As the creature circled for another charge, Roy took a deep breath, centering himself. This time, when the beast attacked, Roy was ready. He sidestepped at the last moment, using a Xindi combat technique Crix had taught him. His hand shot out, striking a nerve cluster on the creature's flank. The beast stumbled, momentarily stunned. Seizing the opportunity, Roy vaulted onto the creature's back. He wrapped his arms around its neck, applying pressure to key points. The beast thrashed wildly, but Roy held on, his teeth gritted in purpose. Seconds stretched into an eternity as Roy and the beast grappled. Finally, with a shuddering gasp, the creature collapsed. Roy rolled clear, rising to his feet as the arena fell silent. Queen Gaia stood, her iridescent robes shimmering in the arena's harsh light. "The human has triumphed," she declared, her melodic voice carrying across the stunned crowd. As Roy was escorted from the arena, he caught snippets of hushed conversations among the Xindi spectators. Some voiced admiration for his skills, while others muttered darkly about the implications of a human's success. In the days that followed, Roy found himself granted more freedom aboard the mothership. He used this newfound mobility to his advantage, carefully observing Xindi technology and social structures as he moved through the vessel's labyrinthine corridors. During one of his exploratory forays, Roy stumbled upon a research laboratory. Inside, he found Dr. Zara hunched over a holographic display, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with concentration. "Ambassador Freeman," Dr. Zara acknowledged, her compound eyes flicking up to meet his gaze. "Your performance in the arena was unexpected." Roy approached cautiously, noting the tension in Dr. Zara's posture. "Thank you," he replied, his eyes drawn to the swirling data on the display. "I couldn't help but notice you're studying human physiology." Dr. Zara's mandibles clicked in what Roy had come to recognize as a sign of excitement. "Yes, your species presents some fascinating biological quirks. For instance, the way your cells respond to stress is quite remarkable." As they discussed the intricacies of human biology, Roy filed away every piece of information, knowing it could prove vital for Earth's future. Meanwhile, in a hidden compartment deep within the mothership, Commander Sarah Chen and her team worked feverishly to crack the Xindi communication systems. Holographic screens surrounded them, filled with alien symbols and code. "I've got something," Lieutenant Park whispered urgently. "Encrypted transmissions. They're talking about a coup against Queen Gaia." Chen's eyes widened. "We need to warn Roy without blowing our cover. Ideas?" Before they could formulate a plan, a priority message from Earth flashed across their screens. General Stone's face appeared, his expression grim. "New orders, team. Find a way to alert Freeman about the coup. The fate of our planet may depend on it." Back in the royal chambers, Queen Gaia paced restlessly, her bioluminescent patterns shifting with each step. "Send for the human," she commanded. Roy entered the opulent chamber, momentarily stunned by its alien beauty. Crystalline structures pulsed with ethereal light, creating an atmosphere both regal and otherworldly. "Your victory has caused quite a stir among my people," Queen Gaia said, her voice carrying a hint of something Roy couldn't quite identify. "Tell me, Roy Freeman, what truly drives you?" As they conversed, Roy noticed a softening in the Queen's demeanor. Her eyes, all 6 of them, seemed to linger on him with growing interest. But before he could probe deeper, the doors burst open. Vex, the Queen's advisor, rushed in. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. There's unrest in the lower decks. Your presence is required immediately." As Queen Gaia swept from the room, Roy's mind raced. Unrest in the lower decks? Could this be related to the coup Chen's team had uncovered? His thoughts were interrupted by Crix's arrival. "Human," the battle-scarred Xindi growled. "I wish to show you our weapons bay. Perhaps you'll find it enlightening." As they toured the vast arsenal, Crix's demeanor shifted. "Tell me, Roy," he said, using the human's name for the first time. "What do you make of our current leadership?" Roy chose his words carefully. "Queen Gaia seems to be a strong ruler." Crix's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Strong, yes, but there are those who question her recent decisions. Her fascination with your species, for instance." Before Roy could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Intruders in Sector 7. a voice announced over the communication system. Crix's eyes narrowed. It seems our tour must be cut short. Return to your quarters, human. Things may get complicated. As Roy hurried through the corridors, his hidden communication device vibrated. He ducked into an alcove, quickly activating it. Freeman here, he whispered. Static crackled, then Chen's voice came through, barely audible. Roy, listen carefully. There's a coup. The transmission cut off abruptly as a shadow fell across Roy. He looked up to see Vex looming over him, eyes glinting dangerously. Well, Vex hissed. What do we have here? Roy's hand inched towards the weapon Crix had given him, his muscles tensing for a fight. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and he was caught in the middle of an alien power struggle with no clear path forward. Forward. Roy's mind raced, weighing his options. He couldn't afford to be caught now, not when he was so close to uncovering the truth about the Xindi power struggle. I can explain, Roy began, but Vex cut him off with a sharp gesture. Save your explanations for the Queen, Vex hissed, reaching for Roy's arm. Suddenly, the corridor lights flickered, and an announcement blared over the ship's communication system. All personnel report to the Central Command Hub for the Human Ambassador's mental acuity trial. Vex hesitated, his grip loosening slightly. Roy seized the opportunity, twisting away from the alien's grasp. We'd better not keep the Queen waiting, he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. As they made their way to the command hub, Roy's thoughts churned. The trial, he'd almost forgotten about it in the chaos of recent events. It was supposed to be a test of his mental capabilities against the Xindi's advanced AI system. Now, it seemed, it would be the backdrop for something far more dangerous. The doors to the command hub slid open, revealing a vast chamber filled with holographic displays and bustling with Xindi activity. Roy's eyes immediately caught an unusual pattern in the light fluctuations of the nearest display panel. His military training kicked in, recognizing it as a warning code. Queen Gaia sat on her elevated throne, her 6 eyes scanning the room. As Roy approached, he noticed Dr. Zara whispering urgently to the Queen, who seemed both intrigued and unsettled by whatever the scientist was saying. Ambassador Freeman, Queen Gaia addressed him, her voice carrying a hint of something Roy couldn't quite identify. Are you prepared for your trial? Roy bowed slightly, using the motion to survey the room. He noted the positions of various Xindi factions, the barely concealed tension in their postures. I am, Your Majesty, he replied, moving to stand before the central holographic interface. The trial began, with the AI presenting complex strategic scenarios that Roy had to navigate. As he engaged with the system, he subtly maneuvered himself to maintain a clear view of both the main entrance and the Queen's private access point. Suddenly, the lights in the command hub flickered, and a low rumble vibrated through the floor. Confused murmurs rippled through the assembled Xindi. What's happening? Queen Gaia demanded, rising from her throne. Before anyone could respond, the main doors burst open. A group of armed Xindi, led by a scarred warrior Roy recognized as Draz, stormed into the room. The reign of complacency ends now, Draz roared, his weapons trained on Queen Gaia. We will no longer stand idle while our civilization weakens. Chaos erupted in the command hub. Loyal guards rushed to protect the Queen, while others sided with the rebels. Roy, caught in the middle, saw Vex moving towards him with murderous intent. Acting on instinct, Roy ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding an energy blast from Vex's weapon. He came up next to a stunned Xindi guard, quickly disarming him and using the alien weapon to deflect another shot from Vex. Through the mayhem, Roy spotted Dr. Zara frantically working at a control panel. Suddenly, a fine mist began to spray from hidden vents in the ceiling. The effect was immediate. Xindi on both sides began to stumble, their movements becoming uncoordinated. Roy held his breath, recognizing the tactic. Using the confusion to his advantage, he fought his way towards Queen Gaia, who was surrounded by Draz and his supporters. Your Majesty, Roy called out, reaching for her. We need to get you to safety. For a moment their eyes met. Roy saw fear, confusion, and something else, a flicker of trust. Without hesitation, Gaia grasped his hand, allowing him to pull her away from Draz's reaching claws. They stumbled through the Queen's private access point, the doors hissing shut behind them. Alarms blared throughout the ship as they raced through the winding corridors of the royal quarters. "My people," Gaia gasped as they finally reached a secure chamber. "How could they betray me like this?" Roy, catching his breath, was about to respond when a holographic display sprang to life before them. It showed the mothership's weapon systems powering up, a targeting reticle centered on a blue-green planet, Earth. "No," Roy whispered, his heart sinking. Everything he had worked for, all the progress he had made in human-Xindi relations, was about to be undone in an act of senseless destruction. He turned to Queen Gaia, seeing the conflict in her alien features. "Your Majesty," he said urgently, "I know you have no reason to trust me, but right now I'm the only ally you have. We need to stop this for both our peoples." Gaia's bioluminescent patterns shifted rapidly, reflecting her inner turmoil. Finally, she met Roy's gaze, her 6 eyes filled with dedication. "What do you propose, Ambassador Freeman?" Roy's mind raced, formulating a plan. "We need to regain control of the ship's systems. Is there a way to override Draz's commands?" Gaia nodded, moving to a hidden control panel. "There's an emergency protocol, but it requires genetic verification from the royal bloodline and input from an outside source." As she spoke, her hand brushed against Roy's, sending an unexpected jolt through him. The physical attraction that had been simmering beneath the surface suddenly flared, intensified by the high-stakes situation. "An outside source," Roy repeated, his voice low. "Like a human?" Gaia's bioluminescence pulsed in what Roy had come to recognize as a sign of excitement or nervousness. "Precisely. Dr. Zara's research suggested that a more intimate genetic exchange could yield unprecedented results." The implications hung in the air between them. Roy knew that what happened next would shape the fate of 2 worlds. As he stepped closer to Gaia, the ship shuddered around them, a reminder of the precious little time they had left. "Whatever it takes," Roy said, his voice firm, "to save our people." Gaia's alien features softened, her hand reaching out to caress Roy's face. As their lips met in a kiss that bridged the gap between their species, Roy knew that their actions in the next few moments would determine the future of human-Xindi relations and the survival of Earth itself. As their lips parted, Roy and Gaia locked eyes, a newfound understanding passing between them. The ship shuddered again, jolting them back to the urgent reality of their situation. "We need to act fast," Roy said, his voice low and determined. "What's our next move?" Gaia's bioluminescent patterns pulsed rapidly as she accessed a hidden control panel. "There's a network of maintenance tunnels that run throughout the ship. We can use them to move undetected." Roy nodded, quickly assessing their options. "Good. We'll need to reach the Environmental Control Center. From there, we can turn the ship's systems against Draz's forces." As they slipped into the narrow maintenance tunnel, Roy felt the heat of Gaia's alien body close behind him. The confined space forced them to move in single file, their bodies occasionally brushing against each other in the dim light. "Stay low and move quietly," Roy whispered, demonstrating a crouching walk. "Like this." Gaia mimicked his movements, her alien physiology adapting quickly to the new technique. As they progressed through the twisting passages, Roy found himself impressed by her agility and quick learning. "You're a natural," he murmured, a hint of admiration in his voice. Gaia's mandibles clicked softly in what Roy now recognized as a sign of pleasure. "Your species' physical adaptability is fascinating," she replied, her voice barely audible. As they neared a junction, Roy held up a hand, signaling Gaia to stop. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the metal walls. Roy's muscles tensed, ready for action. 3 Xindi rebels rounded the corner, their eyes widening in surprise at the sight of the human and their queen. Before they could react, Roy sprang into action, his body moving with precision honed by years of military training. He struck the first rebel with a swift palm thrust to the thorax, sending the alien stumbling backward. In the same fluid motion, he ducked under the second rebel's swinging arm, using the Xindi's momentum to throw him into the third. Gaia, following Roy's lead, moved with surprising grace. She targeted the sensitive spots on Xindi physiology that Roy couldn't have known about, her strikes precise and effective. Together, they subdued the rebels in a matter of seconds, their movements synchronized as if they'd fought side by side for years. As the last rebel fell unconscious, Roy and Gaia found themselves face to face, breathing heavily. The adrenaline of the fight coursed through their veins, heightening the tension between them. "We make a good team," Roy said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Gaia's bioluminescence flickered in agreement. "Indeed, your combat skills are impressive." They secured the unconscious rebels and continued their journey through the maintenance tunnels. As they moved, Roy shared more of his tactical knowledge, teaching Gaia human combat techniques that could be adapted to her Xindi physiology. Finally, they reached the access point to the environmental control center. Roy peered through the grating, assessing the situation inside. To his surprise, he saw a familiar figure working frantically at the control panels. "Dr. Zara," he whispered to Gaia. "She's already here." They entered the control center cautiously, alert for any signs of danger. Dr. Zara spun around at their approach, her mandibles clicking rapidly in relief. "Your Majesty, Ambassador Freeman, thank the stars you're here," she exclaimed. "Draz is attempting to vent the atmosphere in sections of the ship occupied by Loyalists. I've been trying to block his commands, but I can't hold out much longer." Roy quickly assessed the holographic displays surrounding them. "We need to turn the tables on Draz," he said, his mind racing. "Dr. Zara, is there a way to create a non-lethal sedative gas that we can release into the areas controlled by the rebels?" Dr. Zara's compound eyes widened in understanding. Yes, I believe so. With the right combination of compounds." As Dr. Zara worked on synthesizing the sedative, Roy and Gaia focused on rerouting the ship's environmental systems. Their hands moved in tandem across the alien controls, their earlier intimate moment lending a new level of synchronicity to their actions. "Release the sedative now," Gaia commanded as soon as Dr. Zara signaled it was ready. They watched the holographic displays as the gas spread through the rebel-controlled sections of the ship. Vital signs of Draz's forces began to fluctuate, indicating the sedative was taking effect. "It's working," Roy said, a note of triumph in his voice. "We've weakened Draz's hold on the ship. Now we need to push our advantage and make our way to the main bridge." As they prepared to leave the Environmental Control Center, a secure communication channel crackled to life. A familiar voice came through, surprising them all. "Your Majesty, Ambassador," Vex's voice rang out, clear and urgent. "I've seen the error of my ways. Let me help you navigate safely to the main bridge. There are still pockets of resistance that need to be avoided." Roy and Gaia exchanged a look, silently debating whether to trust Vex. After a moment, Gaia nodded. "Very well, Vex," she replied. "Guide us." With Vex's assistance, they made their way through the ship, avoiding the remaining rebel patrols. As they moved, Roy couldn't help but notice the growing synchronicity between himself and Gaia. Their bodies seemed to move in harmony, anticipating each other's movements in a way that went beyond mere cooperation. As they approached the main bridge, the sound of chaos grew louder. They could hear Draz's angry shouts and the clash of weapons. Roy turned to Gaia, his expression serious. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his hand unconsciously reaching for hers. Gaia's bioluminescence pulsed with willpower. "Together, Roy Freeman, we can face anything." With a shared nod of understanding, they prepared to confront Draz and bring an end to the rebellion, knowing that the fate of both their species hung in the balance. Balance. With a shared nod of understanding, they burst onto the main bridge. The scene before them was chaos incarnate. Draz stood at the center, his scarred face contorted with rage as he barked orders to his dwindling supporters. Loyal Xindi guards were engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat with the rebels, the air thick with the sound of energy weapons discharging. Roy and Gaia moved as one, their earlier intimacy translating into an uncanny battlefield synchronicity. They weaved through the melee, Roy's human agility complementing Gaia's Xindi strength. As they approached Draz, the rebel leader's eyes widened in shock. "It's over, Draz," Gaia's voice rang out, her bioluminescence pulsing with authority. "Stand down now." Draz's response was swift and violent. He raised his weapon, aiming directly at Gaia. Time seemed to slow as Roy saw the energy pulse building at the muzzle. Without hesitation, he threw himself in front of Gaia, taking the full force of the blast. Pain exploded through Roy's chest as he crumpled to the ground. Through the haze of agony, he heard Gaia's cry of anguish and the sound of Draz being subdued. As darkness crept into the edges of his vision, Roy felt Gaia's alien hands cradling his face. "Stay with me, Roy." Her voice was distant, tinged with fear. "Dr. Zara, we need medical assistance immediately." Roy's world faded to black. The last thing he saw was Gaia's concerned face hovering above him. When Roy regained consciousness, he found himself in the Xindi medical bay. The sterile, alien environment was softened by the presence of Gaia, who sat vigil by his bedside. As his eyes fluttered open, her bioluminescence flared with relief. "Welcome back, Ambassador," Dr. Zara's voice came from nearby. "You gave us quite a scare." Roy tried to sit up, wincing at the lingering pain in his chest. "How long was I out?" 3 Earth days, Gaia answered, her hand gently pressing him back down. "Dr. Zara has been using our most advanced medical technology to accelerate your healing." Dr. Zara approached, her compound eyes scanning a holographic display. "The treatment has been remarkably effective. Your human physiology seems particularly receptive to our methods." As Roy's strength returned over the following days, he and Gaia spent hours together in the medical bay. They discussed the aftermath of the coup attempt, the challenges of stabilizing Xindi society, and their vision for a new era of human-Xindi relations. "General Stone has proposed a joint peace summit," Gaia informed him during one of their conversations. "He believes it's an opportunity to address the concerns of both our species and establish a framework for cooperation." Roy nodded, his mind already racing with the diplomatic implications. "It's a bold move, but it could be exactly what we need to move forward." As they talked, Roy couldn't help but notice a change in his awareness of Gaia. He found himself increasingly attuned to her moods, able to sense her emotions even before her bioluminescence betrayed them. From the way Gaia looked at him, he suspected she was experiencing something similar. Their growing connection didn't go unnoticed. One evening, as Dr. Zara was performing her usual scans, her mandibles clicked in surprise. "Fascinating," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the holographic display. "Ambassador, Your Majesty, I'm detecting some unusual changes in your biochemistry." Roy and Gaia exchanged a glance. "What kind of changes?" Gaia asked, a note of concern in her voice. Dr. Zara manipulated the display, enlarging a section of intertwined DNA strands. "It appears that the, intimate genetic exchange you shared during the crisis has had some unexpected effects. Your DNA structures are showing signs of what I can only describe as a bonding process." Roy's eyebrows shot up. "Bonding process? What does that mean exactly?" "It's unprecedented," Dr. Zara explained, her excitement evident. "The unique properties of human DNA, combined with Xindi physiology, have created a form of genetic symbiosis. This bonding enhances your physical and mental connection, but it also appears to be creating a degree of biological dependency." The implications of Dr. Zara's words hung heavy in the air. Roy looked at Gaia, seeing his own mix of wonder and apprehension reflected in her alien features. "Is it dangerous?" Gaia asked, her hand unconsciously seeking Roy's. Dr. Zara shook her head. "Not from what I can tell, but we're in uncharted territory. I'll need to conduct further studies to understand the full extent of this bonding process." As news of their unique conditions spread, Roy and Gaia found themselves at the center of intense scrutiny from both human and Xindi factions. Some viewed their bond as a promising sign of compatibility between the species, while others saw it as a potential threat to the purity of their respective races. Amid this turmoil, preparations for the peace summit continued. The Xindi Council underwent significant restructuring, with moderate voices gaining prominence. Crix, having proven his loyalty during the coup, was appointed as the head of a new security force. Vex, acknowledging his past suspicions of Roy, took on the role of liaison between the Xindi government and the human delegation. As the date of the summit approached, Roy and Gaia's bond continued to intensify. They found themselves increasingly able to communicate without words, a silent understanding passing between them with a mere glance or touch. One evening, as they stood together on an observation deck overlooking Earth, Roy felt a sudden surge of unease that he knew wasn't his own. "What is it?" he asked, turning to Gaia. Her bioluminescence flickered with concern. "Something's wrong. I can feel it." Before Roy could respond, an alarm blared throughout the ship. Vex's voice came over the communication system, urgent and tense. "Your Majesty, Ambassador Freeman, we have a situation. A group of human extremists has infiltrated the mothership. They're led by a former military officer named Colonel Hawk, and they're planning to sabotage the summit." Roy's mind raced, his enhanced connection with Gaia allowing them to formulate a response in near-perfect synchronization. As they moved to action, both knew that the next few hours would determine not only their fate, but the future of human-Xindi relations. The mothership's corridors echoed with the sound of running feet and urgent communications as Roy and Gaia made their way to the command center. Their bond hummed with shared purpose and growing apprehension, each acutely aware of the other's thoughts and feelings. Emotions. As they raced through the corridors, their enhanced connection allowed them to communicate without words, coordinating their movements with uncanny precision. "We need to get to the command center," Roy thought, knowing Gaia would understand. She nodded, her bioluminescence pulsing in agreement. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with Crix, who was leading a group of Xindi security officers. "Your Majesty," Crix said, mandibles clicking with urgency. "We've detected multiple breaches in the lower decks. The human extremists are spreading quickly." Roy stepped forward, his mind already formulating a plan. "Crix, we need to coordinate our efforts. Can you pull up a holographic map of the ship?" As Crix activated a portable holoprojector, Roy felt a sudden surge of inspiration. He glanced at Gaia, seeing the same realization in her eyes. Their bond was allowing them to think and strategize as one. "Here," Roy said, pointing to key locations on the map. "We need to secure these junctions. It'll funnel the extremists into more manageable groups." Gaia nodded, her bioluminescence flickering with approval. "Crix, divide your forces. We'll need teams here, here, and here." She indicated the points Roy had identified. As Crix relayed the orders, Roy marveled at how seamlessly he and Gaia were working together. Their enhanced connection was proving invaluable in this crisis. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the corridor into darkness. Emergency lights sputtered to life, casting an eerie red glow. "They've hit the main power core," Gaia said, her voice tight with concern. Roy felt her worry as if it were his own. He reached out, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "We'll fix this," he thought, projecting calm through their bond. As they made their way to the command center, they encountered pockets of resistance. Roy found himself moving with enhanced speed and agility, his reflexes sharper than ever before. He dodged energy blasts and incapacitated attackers with precise strikes, all while maintaining a constant awareness of Gaia's position. They burst into the command center to find it in chaos. Vex was frantically working at a console, trying to restore power. To Roy's surprise, he saw Commander Chen and her team assisting the Xindi crew. "Ambassador Freeman," Chen called out, her voice tight with concentration. "We've revealed ourselves to help. The situation is dire." Roy nodded, grateful for the additional support. He and Gaia moved to the central command platform, their minds working in tandem to assess the situation. "We need to reroute power from the auxiliary systems," Gaia said, her hands flying over the alien controls. Roy followed her lead, his understanding of the Xindi technology deepened by their connection. Together, they began to restore critical systems, their actions perfectly synchronized. As they worked, Dr. Zara approached, her compound eyes wide with excitement despite the crisis. "Your Majesty, Ambassador, I've made a remarkable discovery about your bond. It's evolving at an unprecedented rate, granting you enhanced abilities and a form of limited telepathy." Roy felt a mix of awe and apprehension at this news, sensing similar emotions from Gaia. But before they could process this information, an alarm blared through the command center. "Intruders detected in the auxiliary control room," Vex announced, his voice urgent. Roy's enhanced senses tingled with danger. He knew, without being told, that this was where Colonel Hawk would make his stand. "I need to go there," Roy said, looking at Gaia. He could feel her reluctance to let him face this threat alone, but also her understanding of the necessity. "Be careful," she said aloud, while her thoughts echoed in his mind. "I'll be with you, even if not physically." Roy nodded, feeling strength from their connection. He turned to leave, but Gaia caught his arm, pulling him close. In front of the entire command center, she pressed her forehead to his, her bioluminescence pulsing with intensity. "Come back to me," she whispered, the depth of her emotions flowing through their bond. With a final nod, Roy turned and sprinted from the command center, his enhanced physiology propelling him through the corridors at incredible speed. As he approached the auxiliary control room, he could sense the danger waiting for him. Taking a deep breath, Roy steeled himself for the confrontation ahead. With Gaia's presence in his mind and their shared strength flowing through him, he prepared to face Colonel Hawk and safeguard the future of human-Xindi relations. As Roy approached the auxiliary control room, he felt Gaia's presence in his mind, their shared strength flowing through him. With a deep breath, he entered the room, ready to confront Colonel Hawk and his extremists. The confrontation was intense but brief. Roy's enhanced abilities, coupled with the element of surprise, allowed him to quickly subdue Hawk and his team. As Crix's security forces arrived to take the extremists into custody, Roy couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over him. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but he knew the real challenge was yet to come. Days later, as the Peace Summit began, Roy and Queen Gaia took center stage. The gathered delegates from both human and Xindi factions watched with a mixture of awe and apprehension as the couple demonstrated their enhanced abilities and seamless coordination. Their movements were perfectly synchronized, their thoughts aligned in a way that seemed almost supernatural. Dr. Zara stepped forward, her compound eyes gleaming with excitement as she presented her findings on Roy and Gaia's evolving genetic bond. "What we are witnessing here is unprecedented," she explained, gesturing to a holographic display of intertwined DNA strands. "The Ambassador and Her Majesty have developed a symbiotic relationship at the genetic level, granting them enhanced physical and mental capabilities." The assembled scientists and leaders erupted into intense debate. Some saw this as a promising sign of compatibility between the species, while others expressed concern about the potential implications of such a bond. As the discussions continued, Roy suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. He glanced at Gaia, seeing the same discomfort reflected in her eyes. Within moments, other delegates began to show signs of distress. Alarms blared throughout the mothership as the true nature of the threat became clear. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention, all personnel. A bioweapon has been detected in the air circulation system. This is not a drill. Implement containment protocols immediately." Panic erupted among the delegates as Roy and Gaia's symptoms rapidly worsened. Dr. Zara rushed to their side, her medical scanner whirring frantically. "This weapon," she said, her voice tight with concern, "it's targeting the unique genetic signature of your bond." As Roy struggled to remain standing, he saw Commander Chen coordinating with Xindi security forces to seal off sections of the mothership and begin evacuation procedures. Through their bond, he could feel Gaia's drive mixing with his own. They had to find a way to stop this, not just for themselves, but for everyone on board. Dr. Zara worked tirelessly, analyzing the bioweapon's composition and its effects on Roy and Gaia's unique physiology. After what felt like an eternity, she approached them with a grave expression. "I've found a potential solution," she said, her mandibles clicking nervously. "But it's risky. The only way to neutralize the bioweapon's effects is to complete your genetic bonding process. However, this procedure is irreversible and could alter your physiology in ways we can't predict." Roy and Gaia exchanged a look, their bond allowing them to communicate without words. They both understood the gravity of the situation and the weight of the decision before them. It was not just their lives at stake, but the future of human-Xindi relations. As they grappled with the decision, Crix's voice came over the comm system. "Your Majesty, Ambassador, we've identified the source of the bioweapon. A rogue Xindi scientist, Dr. Vexilor, was working with Colonel Hawk's group. We're in pursuit now." The news added another layer of complexity to their already dire situation. Roy could feel Gaia's anger and betrayal through their bond, mirroring his own emotions. With time running out and the effects of the bioweapon spreading, Roy and Gaia made their choice. They would undergo the complete bonding process, risking their individual identities for the chance to save the summit and everyone on board. As Dr. Zara prepared a specialized chamber in the medical bay, Roy and Gaia stood hand in hand, their bioluminescence pulsing in unison. The assembled delegates watched via video feed, the tension palpable as the couple entered the chamber. The process began, and immediately visible changes swept over Roy and Gaia's bodies. Their forms seemed to blur and shift, emitting a strange, pulsating light. The ship's sensors detected powerful energy fluctuations, causing concern among the technical staff. Alarms blared as the energy released by the bonding process interfaced with the ship's systems in unexpected ways. Power surges rippled through the mothership, and gravitational anomalies began to form in various sections. Through it all, Roy and Gaia remained focused on each other, their minds merging and reforming in ways they could never have imagined. They were becoming something new, something never seen before in the history of either species. As the procedure reached its climax, a blinding flash of light engulfed the medical bay. When it faded, the chamber slowly opened, revealing Roy and Gaia transformed. Their appearance now reflected a perfect blend of human and Xindi characteristics, their bodies radiating an otherworldly energy. They stepped out of the chamber, their movements fluid and graceful. The gathered crowd gasped as Roy and Gaia demonstrated their enhanced abilities. Incredible strength, lightning-fast reflexes, and a level of telepathic communication that seemed to transcend normal boundaries. More importantly, their presence appeared to neutralize the effects of the bioweapon. As they moved through the mothership, affected crew members began to recover, the deadly agent dissipating in their wake. The success of the bonding process and the neutralization of the bioweapon created a wave of cautious optimism among the delegates. However, as the initial relief faded, new questions began to arise. What did this transformation mean for the future of human-Xindi relations? And what consequences might arise from this unprecedented evolutionary leap? As Roy and Gaia stood before the assembled delegates, their new form a living symbol of unity between their species, they knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. The Peace Summit, once focused on negotiating a basic treaty, now faced the monumental task of addressing a biological merger that could reshape the future of both civilizations. In the lower decks of the mothership, Crix and his team continued their pursuit of Dr. Vexlor, unaware of the full scope of the changes that had occurred above. The rogue scientist's capture would be crucial in understanding the full extent of the conspiracy and preventing future threats. As news of the events began to spread throughout the mothership and back to Earth, both humans and Xindi grappled with the implications of this new reality. The transformed Roy and Gaia represented both hope and uncertainty, a bridge between species, but also an unknown factor in the delicate balance of power. The Peace Summit, now more crucial than ever, prepared to reconvene. With Roy and Gaia at its center, the gathered leaders faced the challenge of forging a path forward in a galaxy that had been irrevocably changed. The Peace Summit, once focused on negotiating a basic treaty, now faced the monumental task of addressing a biological merger that could reshape the future of both civilizations. As the delegates struggled to process the implications of Roy and Gaia's transformation, Dr. Zara stepped forward, her compound eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. "Esteemed delegates," she began, her voice carrying across the stunned audience, "what we have witnessed here is nothing short of evolutionary breakthrough. I propose we form a joint human-Xindi research team to study this unprecedented biological fusion." The suggestion sparked an immediate flurry of discussion among the assembled leaders. General Marcus Stone, a grizzled veteran of Earth's space forces, saw an opportunity amidst the chaos. He strode to the center of the room, his weathered face set with grit. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his deep voice cutting through the chatter, "we stand at the precipice of a new era. I propose we leverage this unique development to push the boundaries of our joint capabilities. A human-Xindi space exploration program, with Roy Gaia at its helm, could unlock the secrets of the cosmos." The newly merged entity, now referred to as Roy Gaia, stood silently at the center of the commotion. Their form, a perfect blend of human and Xindi characteristics, radiated an otherworldly energy that both enthralled and unnerved the onlookers. As if to underscore General Stone's point, Roy Gaia suddenly moved with lightning speed, easily deflecting a small projectile that had been launched from the crowd. The would-be assailant, a member of a human purist faction, was quickly apprehended by Crix's security team. The incident brought a hush over the assembly, highlighting the volatile nature of the situation. Senator Helena Graves, a staunch advocate for human genetic purity, seized the moment to voice her concerns. "This abomination," she spat, gesturing towards Roy Gaia, "represents a direct threat to the integrity of our species. We cannot allow this genetic contamination to spread." Her words were met with murmurs of agreement from some human delegates, while others shifted uncomfortably. On the Xindi side, Council Elder Zox raised his voice in protest. "And what of our evolutionary advancements?" he demanded, his scaled skin flushing with agitation. "We cannot risk diluting millennia of progress for the sake of this experiment." The tension in the room reached a fever pitch as arguments erupted between various factions. Roy Gaia observed the chaos with an eerily calm demeanor, their merged consciousness processing the complex political and social dynamics at play. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the mothership. Commander Chen's voice crackled over the intercom. "Security breach in Sector 7. All personnel on high alert." Crix sprang into action, coordinating with human security forces to initiate a ship-wide lockdown. As delegates were ushered to secure areas, Roy Gaia's enhanced senses detected a presence moving through the ship's ventilation system. Without a word, they leapt into action, their movements a blur of speed and precision. They easily outpaced the security teams, navigating the ship's complex layout with intuitive ease. Within moments, Roy Gaia had cornered the intruder, a nondescript individual carrying a specialized containment unit. As Crix and his team arrived on the scene, Roy Gaia's voice, a strange harmony of Roy and Gaia's individual tones, rang out. "This one serves two masters, human purists and Xindi isolationists. They sought to obtain our genetic material." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled crowd. The idea that extremist factions from both species were collaborating added a new layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Before anyone could react further, Roy Gaia suddenly doubled over, their body convulsing violently. Waves of electromagnetic energy pulsed from their form, causing nearby equipment to short-circuit and alarms to blare. Dr. Zara rushed forward, her medical scanner whirring frantically. "Their merged physiology is destabilizing," she shouted over the growing chaos. "We need to get them to a containment chamber immediately." As Crix and Commander Chen worked to maintain order and secure the saboteur, a team of human and Xindi engineers, led by Dr. Zara and Vex, began the frantic process of constructing a specialized containment unit. The mothership's main hangar was quickly transformed into a makeshift research lab. Human and Xindi scientists, setting aside their differences in the face of crisis, worked side by side to build a chamber capable of stabilizing Roy Gaia's volatile energy emissions. Meanwhile, in the ship's medical bay, Roy Gaia's condition continued to fluctuate wildly. One moment, they would be lucid, offering groundbreaking insights into quantum mechanics and Xindi biotechnology. The next, they would be racked with seizures, their body emitting dangerous levels of radiation. As the hours ticked by, the situation aboard the mothership grew increasingly dire. The ongoing energy surges threatened to compromise the ship's integrity, while political tensions among the delegates threatened to boil over into open conflict. General Stone and the Xindi High Council convened an emergency session to discuss their options. The debate was heated, with factions arguing for everything from attempting to separate Roy and Gaia back into their original forms, to using Roy Gaia's powers for military applications. In the midst of this political maelstrom, Dr. Zara made a critical breakthrough. Her voice, tinged with both excitement and urgency, came over the ship's comm system. "We've identified a way to stabilize Roy Gaia's physiology, but it requires a key component: exotic particles from a nearby pulsar." The announcement brought a moment of hushed silence, followed by a flurry of activity. Crix, recognizing the gravity of the situation, stepped forward. "I'll lead the mission to the pulsar," he declared, his eyes sweeping the room. "We'll need a joint human-Xindi team. The fate of both our species may depend on our success." As preparations for the pulsar mission began in earnest, Roy Gaia experienced a moment of clarity. Despite their deteriorating condition, they provided crucial modifications to the expedition's spacecraft, their merged intellect unlocking new realms of technological possibility. The mothership buzzed with activity as the joint team prepared for their dangerous mission. Engineers worked tirelessly to implement Roy Gaia's modifications, while Dr. Zara and her team raced to complete the temporary containment field that would keep Roy Gaia stable until the mission's return. As the expedition team made final preparations to depart, tension hung heavy in the air. The success of this mission would not only determine the fate of Roy Gaia, but potentially the future of human-Xindi relations. With a final check of systems, the modified spacecraft disengaged from the mothership, embarking on its perilous journey to the pulsar. Back on the mothership, Roy Gaia was carefully moved into the temporary containment field, their form pulsing with unstable energy. As the field activated, stabilizing their condition for the moment, all eyes turned to the view screens tracking the pulsar mission's progress. The race against time had begun, with the lives of Roy and Gaia and the future of two civilizations hanging in the balance. Balance. The sense of urgency permeated the mothership as all eyes remained fixed on the mission's progress. Crix gripped the controls of the modified spacecraft, his compound eyes scanning the readouts as they approached the pulsar. The craft shuddered violently, straining against the immense gravitational forces that threatened to tear it apart. "Radiation levels are off the charts," reported Dr. Alara, the human astrophysicist on board. Her fingers danced across the control panel, adjusting the shields. "The modifications are holding, but barely." Crix nodded, his mandibles clicking with tension. "We have no choice. We must press on." The ship's hull groaned as they maneuvered closer to the pulsar. Through the view screen, they could see the mesmerizing, deadly dance of superheated plasma swirling around the collapsed star. "There!" shouted Xindi engineer Zex, pointing to a swirling eddy of particles. "That's our target. The exotic particles we need are concentrated in that region." Crix expertly guided the ship into position, fighting against the pulsar's relentless pull. "Initiating particle collection," he announced, his voice steady despite the strain. As the collection beam activated, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Hull integrity at 62% and dropping," Ilara warned, her voice tight with concern. "Just a few more seconds," Crix muttered, his eyes never leaving the readouts. Back on the mothership, Dr. Zara worked feverishly to maintain Roy Gaia's stability. The merged entity lay within the containment field, their form flickering between solid and ethereal states. "Energy output is increasing exponentially," one of Zara's assistants reported, his voice tinged with panic. Zara's compound eyes narrowed as she made minute adjustments to the field. "Increase power to the quantum stabilizers. We need to keep them contained until Crix returns with the particles." Suddenly, the lights in the medical bay flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Emergency power kicked in moments later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. "What happened?" Zara demanded, her antennae twitching with agitation. Commander Chen's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're experiencing ship-wide power fluctuations. Something's interfering with our main systems." As if in response, Roy Gaia's form pulsed with blinding energy, sending waves of electromagnetic interference throughout the ship. The merged entity's eyes snapped open, their gaze unfocused and distant. "The Arcturus Protocol," they murmured, their voice a dissonant blend of Roy and Gaia's. "Hidden beneath the ice of Europa, the key to unraveling the fabric of space-time." Dr. Zara leaned in, her scientific curiosity piqued despite the dire situation. "What are you seeing, Roy Gaia?" "Xindi quantum drives," they continued, their voice growing stronger. "Capable of manipulating dark energy, Earth's plasma cannon network, designed to repel planetary invasions." Realization dawned on Zara's face. They're accessing both Roy and Gaia's memories. This merged knowledge could be catastrophic if it falls into the wrong hands. Unbeknownst to Zara and her team, A shadow moved through the darkened corridors of the lower decks. Dr. Vexilor, his face twisted with dedication, clutched a vial of shimmering liquid, his perfected separation bioweapon. Soon, he whispered to himself, I will undo this abomination and restore the purity of our species. In the command center, Commander Chen coordinated the search for the rogue scientist. Team Alpha, sweep sectors 12 through 15. Beta Team, focus on the maintenance shafts. He can't have gotten far. As Chen's teams combed the ship, General Stone received an urgent transmission from Earth. Senator Helena Graves's face appeared on the screen, her expression hard and unyielding. General, the situation has become untenable, she declared. The existence of this, Roy Gaia, poses an unacceptable risk to humanity. I've secured support for a tactical strike against the mothership. You have 1 hour to neutralize the threat, or will be forced to take action. Stone's teeth clenched as he processed the ultimatum. Senator, I urge you to reconsider. We're on the brink of a scientific breakthrough that could change everything. Your hour starts now, General, Graves replied coldly before cutting the transmission. On the Xindi homeworld, similar scenes of political turmoil unfolded. Council Elder Zox addressed a growing crowd of supporters, his voice booming across the gathered masses. We must sever all ties with the humans, he proclaimed, his scales gleaming in the harsh sunlight. Their contamination threatens the very essence of our species. We must purify ourselves and return to the true path of Xindi evolution. Back on the Pulsar mission, Crix and his team had successfully collected the exotic particles and begun their perilous journey home. The ship limped through space, its systems strained to the breaking point. Navigation is offline, Ilara reported, her fingers flying over the controls. We'll have to plot our course manually. Suddenly, a brilliant flash illuminated the cockpit. Crix shielded his eyes, recognizing the telltale signs of a solar flare. Brace for impact, he shouted, mere seconds before the wave of charged particles slammed into their vessel. The ship spun wildly, alarms blaring as systems failed across the board. As the chaos subsided, Crix took stock of their situation. Status report, he demanded, his voice calm despite the dire circumstances. Zex looked up from his console, his expression grim. Main engines are offline. Life support is functional, but degrading. At our current speed, it will take us twice as long to reach the mothership. Crix's mandibles clicked in frustration. He knew that every second counted, that Roy Gaia's existence hung in the balance. With steely grit, he made his decision. Reroute all non-essential power to the engines, he ordered. We're going to push this ship beyond its limits. The fate of 2 species depends on our success. As Crix's team raced against time, the mothership became a powder keg of tension. Dr. Vexilor crept closer to his goal. Roy Gaia's condition continued to deteriorate, and forces both on Earth and the Xindi homeworld prepared for drastic action. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of Roy and Gaia, but the future of human-Xindi relations, and possibly the birth of an entirely new species. As the clock ticked down, the crew of the mothership braced themselves for the challenges that lay ahead, knowing that their actions would shape the course of interstellar history. As the crew braced for the challenges ahead, a familiar voice crackled over the ship's communication system. Mothership, this is Crix. We've secured the exotic particles and are on our final approach. Prepare for emergency docking procedures. Relief washed over the command center, quickly replaced by renewed urgency. Commander Chen's fingers flew across the control panel, bypassing standard protocols to expedite the docking process. Copy that, Crix. Docking Bay 3 is prepped and ready. We'll guide you in. The damaged expedition craft limped into view, its hull scorched and buckled from the extreme conditions it had endured. As it maneuvered into the docking bay, the mothership's tractor beams engaged, steadying the vessel for a safe landing. The instant the airlock sealed, Crix and his team burst out, carrying the precious container of exotic particles. Dr. Zara met them at the entrance, her antennae twitching with terrifying anticipation. This way, quickly, she urged, leading them towards the medical bay at a frantic pace. The corridors buzzed with activity as they raced through the ship. Crew members pressed themselves against the walls, allowing the team swift passage. The closer they got to the medical bay, the more pronounced the ship's power fluctuations became. Lights flickered ominously, and intermittent tremors shook the deck plates beneath their feet. As they entered the medical bay, the scene that greeted them was one of controlled chaos. Roy Gaia's form pulsed with blinding energy within the containment field, each surge causing nearby equipment to spark and malfunction. "We don't have much time," Dr. Zara shouted over the din of alarms and machinery. "Their energy output is increasing exponentially. We need to integrate the particles now." Crix handed over the container, and Dr. Zara's team sprang into action. They worked with practiced efficiency, connecting the particle chamber to the containment field's power matrix. As they made the final adjustments, a violent tremor rocked the ship, nearly knocking them off their feet. Suddenly, the doors to the medical bay hissed open. Commander Chen burst in, his expression grim. "We've got another problem. Dr. Vexilor has been—" His words were cut short as a piercing shriek filled the air. Dr. Vexilor himself appeared in the doorway, his eyes wild with fanatical persistence. In his hand, he clutched a vial of shimmering liquid, his experimental separation bioweapon. "Step away from the abomination!" Vexilor screamed, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms. Security personnel flooded into the room behind him, but Vexilor was faster. With a quick motion, he hurled the vial towards the containment field. Time seemed to slow as the glass container arced through the air. Crix leaped forward, his reflexes honed by years of combat training. His clawed hands snatched the vial mere inches from the containment field. But as he landed, his grip loosened, and the vial shattered against the deck. The bioweapon, now airborne, began to spread throughout the room. Panic erupted as both humans and Xindi scrambled to secure breathing apparatus. In the chaos, security personnel managed to subdue Dr. Vexilor, but the damage was done. Within the containment field, Roy Gaia's eyes snapped open, their gaze sharp and focused. With a surge of energy that overloaded nearby systems, they interfaced directly with the mothership's controls. Blast doors slammed shut throughout the vessel, sealing off sections and containing the spread of the bioweapon. Emergency force fields sprang to life, creating barriers between contaminated and clean areas. Dr. Zara, her voice muffled by a hastily donned breathing mask, shouted to her team, "We need to complete the stabilization process now. The bioweapon is interfering with the containment field." As they worked feverishly to integrate the exotic particles, Roy Gaia's energy levels continued to climb. The containment field crackled and warped, struggling to contain the immense power within. With a final, desperate push, Dr. Zara's team activated the stabilization sequence. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a blinding flash that forced everyone to shield their eyes, the containment field overloaded. As the light faded and vision returned, gasps of awe filled the room. Where once two separate beings had existed, now stood a single entity, a perfect blend of human and Xindi physiology. Roy Gaia, now stabilized and in control, radiated an aura of power and serenity. With a mere thought, Roy Gaia neutralized the airborne bioweapon, the contaminated air shimmering as it was purified. Systems throughout the ship began to come back online, damages repairing themselves as if by magic. Roy Gaia's voice, a harmonic blend of Roy and Gaia's individual tones, resonated through the medical bay. "We are whole, yet we understand the complexity of our existence. The path forward requires careful consideration." As the immediate crisis subsided, the implications of Roy Gaia's newfound stability began to sink in. Commander Chen, his expression a mix of awe and concern, opened a channel to the command center. "General Stone, you need to see this. Roy Gaia has evolved. We may need to reconsider our entire approach to the situation." In the tense moments that followed, the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Roy Gaia stood at the center of it all, a living embodiment of unity between humans and Xindi. As the crew of the mothership watched in anticipation, they knew that whatever came next would change the course of history for both their species. Species hung in the balance. As the crew watched with suspenseful pause, Roy Gaia took a step forward, their movements fluid and purposeful. "We have seen the potential of our union," Roy Gaia said, their voice resonating with newfound clarity. It is time to share this vision with both our peoples. General Stone's voice crackled over the comm system. Roy Gaia, we're receiving multiple hails from Earth and the Xindi homeworld. They're demanding answers. Open a channel to both, Roy Gaia responded, their gaze fixed on the console. As the faces of human and Xindi leaders appeared, a hush fell over the medical bay. Roy Gaia began to speak, their words carrying a weight that transcended species barriers. They outlined a future of cooperation, shared knowledge, and mutual growth. The passion in their voice was palpable, igniting hope in the hearts of those who listened. In the days that followed, Roy Gaia's proposal became the cornerstone of intense negotiations. The mothership transformed into a hub of diplomatic activity, with delegations from Earth and the Xindi homeworld arriving to witness the miraculous union firsthand. As weeks turned into months, the initial shock and skepticism gave way to cautious optimism. Roy Gaia's unique perspective proved invaluable in bridging cultural gaps and finding common ground. They worked tirelessly, their enhanced abilities allowing them to process vast amounts of information and mediate conflicts with unprecedented efficiency. The culmination of these efforts came in the form of a historic peace summit. Representatives from both species gathered in the mothership's newly constructed biodome, a symbol of the harmony they sought to achieve. The air was thick with anticipation as Roy Gaia took the podium, their form a living testament to the potential of human-Xindi cooperation. Today we stand at the threshold of a new era, Roy Gaia began, their voice carrying to every corner of the room. An era where the strengths of our species complement each other, where our differences become our greatest assets. As they spoke, holographic displays came to life around the room, showcasing ambitious plans for joint space exploration and scientific research. The audience watched in awe as simulations depicted humans and Xindi working side by side on distant planets and in advanced laboratories. We propose a future where our knowledge, our resources, and our spirits are united in the pursuit of discovery, Roy Gaia continued. Together, we can unlock the secrets of the universe and push the boundaries of what we once thought possible. The proposal was met with a standing ovation, the sound of applause and chittering echoing through the biodome. As the summit concluded, delegates from both species unanimously accepted the vision put forth by Roy Gaia. In the months that followed, the mothership became a hive of collaborative activity. Joint teams of human and Xindi scientists and engineers worked around the clock, implementing the ambitious plans outlined during the summit. The ship's corridors buzzed with a mix of human and Xindi languages, a cacophony that slowly evolved into a harmonic blend of cooperation. Roy Gaia's unique bond continued to deepen, their enhanced abilities proving invaluable in navigating the complexities of interspecies diplomacy. They moved through the ship with grace and purpose, their very presence a reminder of what could be achieved through unity. 1 year after the summit, as the alliance between humans and Xindi grew stronger, Roy Gaia made an announcement that sent ripples through both civilizations. They declared their intention to formalize their union in a ceremony that would combine both human and Xindi traditions. The event was to be broadcast across both worlds, a symbol of the growing ties between the two species. Preparations began immediately, with teams working tirelessly to create a ceremony that would honor both cultures. As the day of the ceremony approached, excitement built on the mothership and beyond. The biodome was transformed into a breathtaking venue, its environment carefully calibrated to support both human and Xindi life. Flowers from Earth intertwined with bioluminescent Xindi plants, creating a stunning backdrop for the historic event. Guests from both species arrived in a steady stream, their diverse forms a living mosaic of the new era of cooperation. As they took their seats, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. The ceremony was about to begin, marking not just the union of Roy and Gaia, but the dawn of a new chapter in the history of both their peoples.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.